So this is the pin particle build that I have been investing in ever since January, since that's when I started playing the game again and actually grinding power levels instead of just regular hero levels. And I managed to complete the build just in time before the release of Black Panther. With that being said, some, if not all gameplay footage in this video was recorded before Black Panther came to the game, so in case you're wondering why the menus and stuff look different, that's why. Now I just want to address that this build isn't because it does the most damage and can one-shot bosses, or is the most groundbreaking build you'll ever see. It was all just for fun, and for getting the character to play the way I wanted to. First off, the arc field is my arc overload specialization, where the arc overload has a force field around you, which I think this is useful not just for supporting yourself but the team as well, as you could just sit inside of the force field and keep shooting and spam rockets basically. And of course the rockets, that'll generate more pin particle damage. So yeah, I find this very useful. And my other specialization, projectiles are reflected back at the enemies, which I think that's a pretty cool upgrade. Doesn't really do much for the actual build, I just think it's a cool thing to equip. Yeah, these other two aren't really as good in my opinion. And then for the Unibeam, I focused the Unibeam on DPS. So basically how I use the Unibeam, I try to use it on groups of enemies to eliminate them quickly, or do it on a very specific enemy such as an Exo or Dreadbot or something to do a lot of damage to them. So of course I have the precision refractor to increase the duration by 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds do make a difference, I will say. And I also have it so the Unibeam does more damage when you're maintaining its focus and DPS on a single enemy, so that would equal more DPS on the enemies, which is useful for when you're trying to focus on a specific enemy, like I said. And this is also great for boss fights. As you can see in this video clip here, what I like doing in boss fights is I like to use pin particles to shrink the boss, and then activate the Unibeam so that it'll do more damage while they're debuffed. Yeah, of course, reserve capacitors, I never see anybody use this. And I don't really blame them, this doesn't really seem that great. And the Omega Beam, if used correctly, this could be very good. But I personally just recommend a regular Unibeam. And then for the Hulkbuster, I use the EMP so that I could get some stun damage going and perform some takedowns, and those could spawn some orbs so that I'll have some more heroic energy to charge up mostly my Unibeam, but Arc Overload too, because my Unibeam does charge up somewhat quickly. I used to use the Unibeam on the Hulkbuster, but I stopped using it because it's very useless. But I've already talked about that like, what, 4 times at this point? I'm not repeating myself. And the missile upgrade, I feel like the missiles are already good enough as is, so I don't really need this. And the Hulkbuster being able to be deployed for 10 more seconds, I love using that. That definitely makes a difference, as my Hulkbuster can last a long time. And something I actually like doing is I like using my missiles at the last second. So once my intrinsic energy is almost out, I use the missiles since they train a lot of intrinsic, which that's good for boss fights once again, since I can do a lot of damage. And then for my mastery page, I have combo finisher mastery so that the damage is increased on my combo finishers, which means I should be getting more particle damage out of the combo finishers as well. And I also have performing takedowns causes enemies to drop a heroic orb once again, because that means I'd be able to charge up my unibeam pretty quick, so that's useful for me. Even though I do mainly use the rockets on Iron Man, I feel like the rockets are already good enough as is, and I don't think they would really benefit that much from upgrades, so I use repulsor upgrades. And believe it or not, repulsors actually used to be my main weapon on Iron Man. I never actually really got into the rocket hype, but that could have also have been because of the fact that I was using Iron Man when he wasn't level 50 yet. So that means more intrinsic energy to drain from the rockets. So yeah, that may have been why I wasn't a big fan of it at first, and it took me a while to grow on them. And then for my intrinsic, I just have increasing the amount of intrinsic supercharge energy so that I'll have more when I'm supercharged. And I also get more intrinsic energy when I do a perfect evade because I'm more of a dodger rather than a blocker. And that's just the way I am in video games in general, not just Avengers, so this suits me pretty well. And I also like having the damage reduction while overcharged, because when I'm overcharged I'm just going to be spamming rockets and I may not really be paying too much attention to what's around me, so it helps to have that in case I take hit damage. And I could use this, the arc reactor generator, but I feel like my intrinsic is good enough as is, so I don't really need this. And then for utility, I use energized poles, because I feel like these other two aren't really that great and don't really suit my playstyle. And then I also like the, once again, reflecting projectiles. I really like that. That's a pretty useful upgrade. And then for my flight ability, I actually switched between Afterburner and Countermeasures, but Countermeasures is mostly what I have equipped. I use Afterburners when I'm in like a big Warzone mission, so that I could get from area to area quicker. But when I'm doing a boss fight or something, I just use Countermeasures. The thing I like about countermeasures is that sometimes in this game, there's so much stuff trying to shoot you that all you can really do is just dodge, 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 dodge. So I feel like countermeasures provides a counter to that and gives you some space and room to breathe. So I find it a very useful upgrade. And Champion XP isn't really all that important, but here's what I have so far. I'm mainly focusing on heroic stuff right now, as I feel like focusing on things that aren't as good can balance out your build a little bit better. And Iron Man's heroics are pretty good, specifically with Unibeam and Hulkbuster that I really like, so yeah, I think having these is definitely a good option for me. Okay, so now for my gear, the most important part of a build. I have Centurion's Mark XV Doomfist, which allows me to do particle damage on my melee attacks, which is pretty good. And I also get more intrinsic energy when I collect heroic orbs, which isn't really the most useful thing, but it's still pretty cool. And a little fun fact about this exotic piece is that I actually got this during the Tachyon Anomaly event, so that was pretty cool that I have a gear piece that I like to commemorate the event by. So I think it was worth my time for that. And the rest of my pieces are just legendary pieces, but that's not really that much of a bad thing. Okay, and for this I have another Centurion piece, the Mark XIII Muon Ray, where repulsor and missile attacks do particle damage, and I also do more damage while overcharged. Now, the thing about this is that I was actually planning on getting a gear piece for laser attacks to do particle damage, since that's what I used to use, as you can see here. But I ended up getting this from the Maestro villain sector, and I just figured, you know what? This is good enough, possibly even better actually. So what I like to do is get some rockets and repulsor damage in there to do some particle damage, and then I'll switch over to my lasers once they're shrunk to do some DPS. And then if I'm running out of intrinsic, I'll go over there and do some melee attacks on them. Okay, so obviously on this piece, the most important perk here is the second one, which increases the amount of particle damage dealt with any attack by 20%, which is very good. Now alternatively, I do also have some exotics here, and also this legendary piece that I can switch between. Now obviously this does cryo damage, and that's something that I kind of considered as well with my build, is that I might switch between Pim Particle and cryo for my melee so that I can mix and match some of my elemental status. And I think it also is just pretty cool to mix particle and cryo together, because I could do cryo damage with my melee attacks to apply that status to them to freeze the enemies, and then I could go to town on them to finish them off. And then for this, my heroic gear pieces aren't really important to the build, but this is what I have anyway. And I also use this sometimes, since it increases the damage that I do with my Hulkbuster. And this increases the amount of cryo damage I do, so whenever I decide to switch over to cryo, that'll definitely help out. And of course I have the Voidtech Transponder, which further increases the amount of particle damage that I do by 30%. So my 30% combined with my 20% here overall leads to a 50% increase. So overall, this gear piece, as combined with the other perks it has, is really good for Pim Particle builds that you're trying to do. And the way you get this is by completing the Wastelands mission chain. So I definitely recommend getting this. It's even just useful for the Hank Pym summon. And then for my ISO shards, I have Ultimate Heroic Charge so that I can summon the Hulkbuster quicker, as well as some increased stun damage from heavy combo finishers. That's not really that important, but it's still pretty good. And this, once again, helps to charge up the Unibeam, so this is great. But of course the thing is here is that this gear piece only goes up to 135, so as a result this Iron Man is only 149 power level. But I do also have this ISO shard. I don't really think I'm going to use this that much, but I still have it regardless, so when I equip this, Iron Man is 150 power. And these are my stats, so if you want to pause to check this out, you can. So that's my build on Iron Man, the first character that I've ever completed a build on, so that's a good accomplishment on my end. Obviously everyone plays differently and has different builds, so you don't really have to copy mine, but feel free to do so if you want. Ultimately, it's up to you. The whole point of the skill tree and the gear grind of this game is to play the way that you want, so I'm not really telling you how to do things. I'm just showing off the way that I play. But once again, if you want to copy my build, feel free to do so. It's completely up to you. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a great day/night and take care.